Welcome to FRB Vibe. Today I'm delighted I have Garry Clark Strange with us. And we'll be talking to Garry about the last session we did on diversity and inclusion. And Garry has a whole wealth of knowledge and experience to share with us. I think if Garry doesn't know, it's not worth knowing. I think that's what people tell me. So Garry, you've got an awful lot to live up to this morning.
Just a bit.
So welcome, Garry. Just briefly sort of introduce yourself to our listener.
Cool. Thank you for that intro, Carl. Now slightly scared about the next half an hour. The expectations are that high. Hi, everyone. My name is Garry Clark Strange. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently the head of inclusion and diversity at Green King. Green King is the pubco, brewery and hotel chain with about 38,000 staff employed across the UK. I've been there for the last 3.5 years, heading up the inclusion revolution, as we've been calling it, and really setting the organisation and influencing the wider hospitality and pub industry on the need to embrace inclusion and create a feeling of belonging for people across the space, regardless of their background. And it's been a really fun 3.5 years that I've been there. I am just unfortunately about to leave the organisation as I made a bit of a life change last year and decided to we packed our bags and we moved ourselves down to Spain, where I currently live. So I've just set up my own independent consultancy in inclusion. One of the things I think with making a life change, I really had to question myself around what is my passion? What do I want to do if I'm creating? If I'm going to step into the world of consultancy and be a consultant, what do I want to do? And I've got a background in wider HR recruitment for years and could have kind of gone back to that, but actually my passion is truly in inclusion, and I'm hoping to kind of spread the message and spread the opportunities for organizations wider to really jump on this train, or to, if they're on their journey, to really make sure they're maximizing that journey. And I think that's important as we kind of step into this conversation today, is recognizing that people, organizations, society are all in very, very different places. When it comes to this topic, there is definitely broad ends of the spectrum, and it's helping people understand that really, and where they want to get to is my being and my why. And from the bit of time I've had talking to you so far, Carl, I've enjoyed our conversations, and as you well know, I like to talk, so I will be quiet and let us start the discussion.
Well, this could be a healthy competition here, because everyone knows that I like to talk as well. So, this could be interesting, and I must say to everybody that you'll see Garry has a background up, and his face goes in and out a little bit, and that's because the room behind is full of those boxes, having moved across to Spain. So, and I'm sure you'll make a huge success of your consultancy, Garry, because you're passionate and knowledgeable about the subjects, and I think that's what you need to step out of a large organisation, move into consultancy. Passion and knowledge, good combination.
Exactly.
So the last session, Garry, the sort of premise of the conversation was really to look at what we've been doing over the last 5-10 years, diversity inclusion. What's been successful? What are our main achievements? What are the challenges? Yeah. And if we project that forward, what do we think the future will look like? Because around this topic, I think I get a feel that it's a little uncertain at the moment. There are question marks. There are things that have gone really well, and because of the success, and it's having more impact, it's causing more ripples within companies and communities. As you said earlier, there's people on different places on the scale here.
Yeah.
So, what were your thoughts for the group? We started talking about groups and inclusive groups, exclusive groups. What are the purpose of running groups? What are your thoughts on that?
I think so. For me, I go from excited about the opportunities to scared about the narrative in equal measure on a daily basis. So I think you're right. As I said, there is people on all stages of the spectrum, and I must say out loud, it's okay to be wherever you are on that spectrum. Like, you don't have to fully be behind the changes that are happening, and I fully value everyone's place on their opinion on the way that the world is changing towards this definition of inclusion. And I think at times we get too into the detail of it, which can make people fearful. So they can be scared of the changes because they don't understand what it is. But actually, look at the the true basis of what inclusion is. It's just being welcoming and just making sure that people can belong, regardless of who they are. Like that's the DNA of it. And actually, you know, the narrative that sometimes grows from that can be quite unhealthy sometimes. It can also be really healthy because it challenges and gets us to think about things differently. So I think the current state is one where there is some resistance, and there is also still a lot of change happening, and a lot of organizations doing amazing things in this space. And they're doing it through different ways, whether that be through their own networks internally, through their own strategic objectives, just through being part of, you know, collectives and different, you know, signatories, or, you know, different activity that is happening out there. There is lots of really, really positive change happening. And some of it is happening, I think, because organizations realize, well, organizations want to do it because they want to be inclusive. They want to improve their people culture. And I think on the flip side of that is also the market is changing from an employee point of view and what they expect from their experiences at work. And this is now becoming part of what is expected from a lot of people, especially younger generations coming up. They are looking for this focus, but also the focus to be real and authentic, and not just something that is ticking a box or is being seen as, we're talking during Pride Month, so the one right now is rainbow washing. You know, who's throwing a logo, rainbow on their logo, and actually doing nothing behind it. It's real authenticity. So I think I don't even know what the question was, Carl. I've gone off on a tangent, but it's like the reality right now is one of, I think things are tough in this space. They were easier a few years ago post-COVID, if I'm truthful. There was more, I think, momentum behind it. And I think at the moment there's a bit of fight against it, which I think is unhealthy, but also I think I see that as a healthy challenge to make us be louder and remember that it's about everybody feeling included. That's the most important thing. It's not just about specific demographics. It's the whole of society feeling like they belong. That's the reality that we should be aspiring to.
Yeah, and I think it's great, guys. A couple of things I'd like to pick up on there. I think everybody being included is the direction of travel.
Yeah.
And I think but there's some challenges in that at the moment, perhaps there are pockets that don't feel included, or even majorities in some cases that don't feel included, which is difficult.
Yeah.
But it is a very changing environment. And you said, I think, when you first started talking, that this is maturing as a subject. Okay, lots of things around, lots of issues are maturing, and around mental health, around gender, around disability, lots of areas, and it's difficult for everybody to keep up with that change.
Yeah.
And some of that, right towards the end of the last conversation, actually, we hit on this generational piece, that even though some people of an older generation may be trying to help, they're not helping in the right way. But you also get some younger generation, and I'm generalizing here, so apologies. But you also get some people in the younger generation, or in a pocket of understanding, that may fail to clearly articulate what they mean, or be talking in a language that others don't understand.
Yeah, that's the key. It's help. I think you're right. You know, it is generational. And as I kind of said at the start, everyone is on their own stage of the scale. There's a few things to, I think, unpick for that. The dominant part of any population, you know, obviously, if you're speaking about the UK, people, the dominant, I think, culture that gets talked about a lot in business space is the white cisgender male. And I think there is a feeling at times now of vilification of the white cisgender male. And actually that's unhealthy, because if change is going to happen, everybody needs to be part of it. And excluding your dominant it doesn't really help, in my view, the change. Now we need to be aware that the dominant, whatever that dominant is, exists in an area of privilege, and we're trying to create equity here. So obviously we've got to then appreciate that we're trying to give opportunities to people who are in the minority groups. But to do that, everybody needs to be part of the conversation. It doesn't help within from me if you have this battle. And then part of that battle, if you go generationally, is a lack of understanding, because, you know, I sit as a 44-year-old person who identifies as male, and I probably know a lot more than other people my age and in my friendship group because of the space I work in. But actually, things that were okay for me in my youth 20 years ago, or what my expectations are totally different. And I'm behind the times, I would say, of what the younger generation are thinking now. But the only way I can get over that is to not be scared of learning, but to learn that in a respectful way. So I call it respectful curiosity, where it's okay not to know everything, but it's better to know more. But it's that fine line balance of not wanting to be cancelled by asking a question or saying something out loud, to a case of, it's, you know, actually, if I don't understand something, or if I don't have I might have an opinion on something, but to be okay to be challenged on that, but to be challenged in a healthy way. And there's one example that comes into my head, which I talk about quite a lot because it's a change in my community. So I identify as a gay male, so I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community, but I do not identify with the word queer. So in my generation, queer was a slur, and it was something that personally to me, I was offended by, and I was called, and it wasn't nice. So I fully respect the community now that identify as queer, but I will never identify as that. I can't. It's not in me. But that's how language has changed. So I remember when this word started coming back out, I was really offended by it. And I'm part of the community. And I was like, how? Why? Why would we even go down this route that we think this word is okay? But we've reclaimed it. And would I personally reclaim it? Well, no, because I don't. I still haven't. I won't use it I'll use it to refer to others if that's how they identify, but don't identify me as queer.
Gary, it's really interesting to have this conversation, and I think a lot of us agree that we need more respectful conversations like this, okay? Because that's where we get to. And it's interesting because I'm not going to disclose how many years ago I was a 20-year-old, right? And it's a few more years than that. But things have changed hugely. Now, there's a couple of things I think important to say here is that that's not an excuse. So I'm not using my age as an excuse for not being able to engage with some of these things, and an excuse not to engage with some of these things in an open way. And I think that's disappointing when people perhaps of older generations do. But the language thing is really interesting because it's something that you said a few times there, which is talked about a lot now, is I identify as.
Yeah.
Now that's really interesting, you see, because that's a complete change in one's life position.
I wouldn't have said that 20 years ago, Carl. Like,
I know it's crazy.
Said it 10 years ago, but I'm just used to saying it now.
It's amazing, and I spend a lot of my time as a coach. I do a lot of exec coaching and stuff, and it's really interesting how this dichotomy of how do I see myself and how do others see me, and the sort of the battle between those two things and the communication of those two things is really very interesting, and can often be a source of unhappiness, conflict, miscommunication, that people see themselves in one way and others see them differently, and trying to sort of get those things more in what am I word I'm looking for, more closer together, how someone sees me and how I see myself. If that's a fairly consistent view, then usually the communication's better. So this I identify as, it turns it all on its head, and it's really interesting. It's a fascinating subject to get involved in, but it does mean that people have to move towards it, and
it does. And it's interesting when you become comfortable with it, how it just becomes normal. So it wasn't something that even using my pronouns, I remember when I first started using them a few years ago, I'd never done it before, but now I just do it every time I introduce myself.
Yeah.
And for me, the I identify as is actually, I guess, internally, it's a freedom to say I am male. I was born male, and I identify as male. And I don't think that will ever change. but it gives the freedom to say that you could change. I identify as gay. I could identify differently in future, and it's kind of giving you that. It's respectful of others, but it's for me, it's just a way to be more free and be more yourself, I guess. But and I do like the things like pronouns identifying is because to normalize it makes it okay then for people who are not societal norm, as we would call it, which I really hate, you can imagine, to feel that they're not othered by if they identify as he, them, for example. So by me using my pronoun and saying he, him, then someone else saying he, them, it's just a normal conversation, rather where if I didn't say it and then that person said it. And it's the same with identify for me. It gives me a bit of freedom, but also it supports others. But it's interesting how it just becomes natural language. And I appreciate, right? I do sometimes live in an echo chamber and a bubble because I work in the space. So I'm just used to doing that. Do I go into a pub and go, I identify as male? No, it's not my daily thing, but I get used to it in certain scenarios where it's just now the norm, which it wasn't a few years ago. But so many things have changed that, I was talking earlier this week where the world of work has changed and so I don't want this discussion to be about me, but like 10 years ago in an organization, I never would have come on camera in a t-shirt with tattoos on show. That just wouldn't happen. But now I'm allowed to be myself.
Yeah.
That's me. And if you don't like that, if I'm not corporate enough for you because I'm wearing a t-shirt and I'm showing tattoos, well, then we're not the right, match as an organization. And that's, I think, the same for generations coming into work. They have to feel like they can belong, because if you're masking every day at work, you're not being as productive as you could be.
So here we go. I got a feeling we can talk all day if you're free, Garry.
Yeah, and I still don't even know what the question was.
The question, you're answering the question. You're answering a better question than I asked.
Okay.
So the language and the identify as has also had a liberating effect for other people.
Yeah.
And we talked about diversity needing to expand to be seen as more inclusive. And so you've got things like neurodiversity, which I spent a lot of time working in, and that's enabled people to also say that they're neurodiverse.
Yes.
And if that becomes normal, then that has two effects, actually, very similar to what you're saying about your situation. It becomes an acceptable thing to say. It also, though, increases the understanding of it.
Yeah.
And takes away the hidden element, so people can more actively engage and really understand what that means. Because at the moment, if you take ADHD or autism or dyslexia or any of these things, people have what I would describe a pocketbook, a short meme of what that means, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not good enough, really. People should understand or be open to understanding the implications of that, good and bad. And for everything, there's good and bad in it.
Yeah. And I think it's when that moves from being hidden to non-visible, because that's the power in that. You shouldn't have to hide it, but it's a non-visible disability in neurodiversity in a lot of cases, not in all. There was something one person told me, and I've said it a few times publicly, which is around like autism. When you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because everybody's unique. And this pocketbook of, is right? And you go, oh yeah, I understand autism. I understand autistic people. You don't. I hosted a podcast recently, and one of the guests at the end of it, and has said publicly since now, is that it's given her the opportunity to be proud to be autistic. And that's a narrative that I just adore. That it's not even that I feel comfortable to out myself as autistic in work. I can be proud to be that. And that's even further. It's not just that it's okay for me to be, I can be proudly autistic, because that allows them to. I know there's definite debates about whether some people will identify as autism as a superpower or not. I'm not going to go into that debate, but it allows them to be like use their skills to the best and be proud of the great things that they can do, and not look at what it might well be or the challenges for them. Just look at what are the great things they offer as an individual. And I adore that narrative. I'd love to get to that.
I'd love that, and I like the theme you're following here about things becoming going back to being invisible or becoming the norm.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated the other day. I played a lot of rugby when I was younger and follow rugby and things like that. I think the women's rugby game is tremendous. And it's changed, and I think it's really good for society. And there was a female rugby player, an England player, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name. I can't remember her name.
I'll help you out on this one, Carl. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. But she said her daughter seriously turned around to her mum and said, "Mum, have men always played rugby?" Wow, what a moment. You think, yeah, fantastic, right? And it's sort of like what you were talking about. It's like, wow, we've got there.
Yes.
Right? What a great thing for a young girl to say. Have men always played rugby? And I think that's the sort of what we're looking for. And I think that's the maturity that we're looking for in what we're doing. So that it becomes business as usual, it becomes accepted, it becomes the norm. People are just more engaging with who you are as a person. We don't need the labels and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it gives hope, right? So we talk about the new generation coming up and their expectations. And, you know, I'm equally excited for them and scared because of things going on in the world. But the fact that they won't have this burden of history that, say, some of our generations have around just the lack of equality, the lack of equity, the lack of inclusion, it's exciting. And I've said this quite a few times. You know, I think what the great thing is, there'll become a point in time where we don't have to have this discussion, where the role that I currently operate in or this environment is gone. That's a great day. Like I'm not scared of that day. I'm like, bring it on, because that's the day where we know we've achieved utopia. Still miles away from it, let's be clear. But that's what we should be aiming for, where it is just naturally there, and dominance in society or dominance in work is eradicated.
Oh, the optimism of youth. I do like the optimism of youth going on here.
I always dream big, but we can make changes, and just conversations like today make change. It's marginal changes, and if one person listens to this and thinks differently, then that's a change. They're all stacking over time, and then the generation coming up is thinking differently. Like, and I talk, you know, utopia momentum here, but actually we have to keep having this conversation, and that's what we were saying earlier on. That I think that the challenge that we're getting in this space right now is encouraging a lot of us to actually be more vocal about the changes that still need to happen, because otherwise the narrative, the anti-narrative, will just be louder, and we can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, what we can't do is we can't empower the negative narrative here. Right?
Yeah.
And in some cases we do that, right? By we don't mean to, but we empower it. And some of the things that are said, and Sam Ellis, who you saw at the last meeting, we've talked about this a lot. Some of the negative stuff that goes on around, or the things that are too passionate or too one-sided, don't help the discourse that allows people to learn and engage. And I think that's one thing we have to be really careful of on all subjects. That we have to make this a respectful conversation and acknowledge other people's points of view. The other good one to look at here, which may be stalling, I don't know, is disability, physical disabilities. Because I have someone in my family with physical disabilities, and the way they're viewed has fundamentally changed from when they were younger. Right, we've got the Paralympics, we've got all these things, and it is almost unbelievable how much it's changed in a positive direction. And yet, we then find that we've still got venues that have no wheelchair access. That can't provide the basics. Sorry?
Massive unemployment in disabled people. You know?
It's huge.
It's huge.
So we get there, and so what we're about is trying to help that. I think you said right at the start. So your opening statement here was going to prove to be hugely enlightening for everybody.
Glad you can remember it, Carl.
Yeah, your opening statement is something about how do we follow? How does society follow? And how do we get the actions? And a lot of what we're about when we're working in diversity and inclusion is about putting those actions in place as well. Because there's no point in having full awareness of disability and empathy with disability and have it as business as normal when they can't get in the building, right?
Yeah.
So you're like all the good things are going on, but then the practical stuff. So I think is a part of the role of what's happening here with diversity and inclusion is we need to provide the practical backbone to back that up.
Yes, but I do think it needs to be two-sided as well. So we don't live in a perfect world. So, you know, if we talk specifically about accessibility, what we can't do, I wish a lot of organizations and venues could, but they can't change things overnight. So they can set an intent, they can set a plan, and then we have to give opportunity, we have to allow time for that to happen. We can't expect perfection in any sense of this thing overnight. Things have existed as they've existed for X time, right? Let's not put a time frame on it. So
Yeah.
has got to be something on both sides of the equation. It's not just in disability; it's in everything where you're looking for commitment, not perfection, and that commitment is what's truly important. Now, you can see through commitment because if people just put out a statement or an organization says something, but then there's no actions happening behind that, then it is just it's corporate jargon. But it's commitment and action. And then you've got to allow time for that. You can't expect perfection overnight. And that's really hard if you are, for example, it's easy for me to say that I'm not a person with a physical disability. So, you know, but there is this realism that we've got to allow things time to change, but we've also got to talk about it and help make the change happen. So it's kind of the level of patience that I implore in this space, and it's kind of going back to the same thing I was saying earlier on about a level of patience around let's get rid of cancel culture in this space where if you say something wrong, you're cancelled. It's not about that. There's something here around we've got to help make this change happen together. It's everybody in. And that's healthy. That's healthy change together. Whether that be as a customer coming into any services or as an employee coming into an organization. And it makes it more authentic and more real and ultimately a better outcome because there's diversity of thinking and diversity of just idea in what that is. Like if you ask me as someone with a non-physical disability how to make X room accessible, I might have a view.
Yeah.
But I would have a different view to a group of people who have got lived or living experience of that. And
it's balancing these things that is the challenge for what we're doing here. And there's so many similarities, okay, between something like customer experience, right? I know it sounds bizarre, but for the business environment, the change is very similar because it's a mindset change, it's a cultural change. But then there's practical change as well that needs to happen. And then we haven't even opened the can of worms, which is how do you measure your success, right? That's not, just perhaps I've got time to open that one.
This one today.
But these things have to flow, and you have to be working on all the fronts. If you're only putting a good message out, that's no good. If you're only doing tokenism, that's no good either. But there's also going to be stages and different elements that are difficult to change, and they're going to take a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
So how do you judge those things and how do you prioritize those things is really important. But that means that we have to mature how we go about driving change.
Yes.
And I think in our last discussion, you and I agree that we need to go not just from influence, we do need to get into that return on investment. We need to get into that real business priority. That means money, that means driving profit. And how do we prove that? What are your thoughts on that as a final thought?
Not being scared of that conversation is hugely
important.
You know, let's be really open. Businesses exist in most cases, not obviously it's not for profit, etc. But there's a commercial gain or there's some gain of all business. And if having a more diverse and a more a workforce that feels that they belong and are included drives better performance. Let's be really, really clear and open about that, and stop hiding behind the narrative of we're just doing this for the sake of it, or it's the nice thing to do or the right thing to do. It's good for business, and actually it's good for the well-being of your employees.
And I agree with you, and it's both. It doesn't mean if you suddenly go to the ROI, how does this affect the bottom line? That doesn't mean you drop the passion or you drop doing it because it's the right thing to do. Some people think it's one or the other. It's not. It's both. Then you're going to win the game.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Now that's almost perfect timing, Garry. So that's flown past. If anybody wants to join these discussions with me and Garry on diversity, customer, lots of different things, please go to www.frb.buzz/topics, and you can come and join some of these conversations. So, Garry, we're meeting again in a couple of weeks, aren't we, for the next session? So I look forward to speaking to you then. Have a good weekend. Enjoy Spain.
Will do.
Are you gonna get rid of the background just at the last minute so everyone can see the boxes behind you?
No, definitely not. And I must apologize. I think by putting this screensaver on, we've had some delays on the Wi-Fi today. It's not because I'm just in Spain. Like, we actually have really good Wi-Fi here.
Okay.
Apologies for that. It's been a thrilling conversation, and I can just say from the short time I've been involved in the wider conversation as well with FRB, it's a really great place to come and just have open chats, and it's challenging my own thinking all the time. So thanks for having me as part of this, Carl. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure to have you with us, and we'll soon knock that optimism out if you don't mind.
Never.
Thank you. Speak to you